Now that we are finished with the presentation part, we can move into the actual fun part where you can ask all kinds of provocative questions.
I believe that all the people present here would like to contribute to positive results. So I'm talking about today, and I'm talking about the future. And this is why I would like to propose that we meet again, I don't know, in 2 or 3 months, whenever you feel it's necessary, and to conduct this same type of meeting, for in the form of a brainstorming or of a think tank, because all of us, I believe, agree that we would like the Ukraine to be successful, to come out of this state of survival, to come out. Because all consumers in Ukraine and in the world are the same. We all want to live better. And today, we will certainly not discuss and find a solution to all the global issues that we are discussing. This is why I do believe in regular meetings with all stakeholders. I would like to point this very important word, stakeholder. What do I mean by that? This is, for example, civil society. Ukraine is very lucky to have a more and more active civil society, and I believe that we have representatives of the civil society here. Business. Business, especially Western companies, I can tell you, are staying in line to enter the Ukraine. But because of certain difficulties that I will not discuss here, but that you know, they cannot start business in Ukraine. So how can we improve the climate so that they can start the business? Which of course is contributing to better quality of life, because the secret of better quality of life is cooperation in all its forms. Only in countries where there is trust, the word trust is extremely important, then the economy can develop. If you have a trust, then you can develop. And this is what I believe we can certainly contribute seriously.
I completely agree with you. Yes, I'm sorry, please.
Спасибо большое за интеллектуальную дискуссию вечернюю. У меня вопрос будет касательно вот журналистики и экономики, которые про актуальные вопросы говорили. Вот господину Вересню Микола сказал, что о проблемах вот о Савике Шустере это подтверждение того, что в принципе в экономической точке зрения вот, журналистикой тяжело в Украине заниматься, потому что это неприбыльный бизнес. Вы согласитесь? И были ли у вас такие моменты в жизни, когда, например, если о том, что говорили вот, экономисты вот сегодня, о проблемах, которые были в странах Вышеградской группы, у истоках реформ, в которых стояли вот известные личности, и кого вы видите в Украине в будущем? Например, это молодежь, которая сегодня очень часто уезжает на Запад учиться, возможность возврата ее. И ваше видение вот, касательно тех проблем в журналистике, когда, вот, например, сегодняшняя госохрана, например, очень часто может приложить силу к журналисту, если видят какие-то вопросы, которые хотят сделать журналистское расследование касательно онлайн-декларации, которые сегодня очень актуальна, журналистское расследование. Спасибо.
Does anybody need this translated into English? Yes. So I think the essence of this was that Mr. Veresen explained everything about the televisions and how profitable and unprofitable they are, and what is the future of Ukrainian journalism, and I think that was the essence. When it comes to financing in journalists, me? What I'm saying about me. I'm not the first one I'm talking about. Business is not mine. We're talking about business of the channels, of the owners of the channels. I just get a salary. And sometimes I don't like what they're giving me. Sometimes I like it. It depends differently. Different channels, different salaries. Now, about state security who pushes around journalists. That was another part of his questions. That they don't give you the right to carry out your job. You saw this movie, documentary, about the wedding of the son of the general prosecutor. Everybody's seen the video probably here. I don't really like Ukrainian investigation type of movies because Ukrainian journalists often think that power, authority, should not, but is must, obliged, not just to talk about themselves, but almost conduct a striptease before the journalists. I don't like this. In that clip, there was a lot of different interesting things in that clip, but it's not complete violations of the journalists' rights. Because when the president arrived, and journalists saying, what is security doing here? In any country, especially in a country at war, the president is protected by security, no matter where he went, whether it be wedding of the general prosecutor's son or anywhere else. In my opinion, security did not always behave themselves correctly in that moment. And there was mistakes, I would admit. But it's not 100% that journalists were good and the security was bad. It was about 50-50 that instance. Is there anybody else who has questions? Oh, I'm sorry, may I please add? I just want to remind you that we are not a Protestant nation. And the relations towards the authority is not as strict towards its mistakes, towards their need to become wealthy, as they would have in Protestant nations. It's a very important thing to understand. Wolfram.
The title of today's evening is The Past, the Present and the Future of Ukraine. Yeah? Past we know, the poor present we know, but we have no idea about the future. And I came here to listen about the future of Ukraine. And I haven't listened an answer. I do not agree with you that Ukraine is totally special. Yeah? I agree with you that Ukraine is not unique at all. Yeah? While we are sitting here, come together for 3 hours in the evening, I guess in the same time China is creating a GDP close to equal to the GDP of Ukraine in 1 year. So we have no time to wait anymore, and I want to listen from you where we go, because if we wait for the next elections in 2019, I guess Ukraine will not survive the next year. All what we need, I say it now as a lawyer, as you, Alex, or Irina and me, we are all lawyers. All what a country needs in order to prosper is good governance and rule of law, nothing else. It's not so difficult. And my question is, why the hell Ukraine is not able to do this?
Thank you. Because they're different. No, actually, that's the real reason. But this doesn't mean that they will win. I can tell you that the phrase, it doesn't really say anything, but behind that sits a lot of thought. Historical tendencies are more powerful than limitations. Historical tendencies are on our side. It's just that we're moving slowly. And your expression that there's nothing more simple than make laws and everything will fall into place, talk about that you may not feel what are different values. It's impossible to just make a law in a country where laws are not respected. This is a long process, What happened in Ukraine and what Paschairo was talking about in the 1990s, you can just walk outside and say, this country will never survive under any circumstances. And if this country survived 1990s, then now it's 100% it'll survive. And there lies one little problem, which has pluses and minuses. Foreigners arrived in the 90s, and they asked the question, how can you live like this? How? Well, there was light on Krещатик, was from Bessarabka towards the Ukrainian house. That's it. The rest of the Kiev was dark. There was no light. But there was no protests, except in Donbass area. And everybody was saying, how do you live like this? Well, because each Ukrainian has 600 portions of land, hundreds. And this means that he doesn't really rely on the government too much for assistance. He relies upon himself. He knows he has moonshine, he's got salo, and he's got potatoes. That's it. And there's no government. And that's a big plus for the 1990s. But this is also a huge minus because Ukrainians don't understand what institutions, government institutions are. Government, this is our government, it feeds me, it does anything good for me, I can do everything better myself without it. And why did they did a protest in Donbass? Because Donbass doesn't have the hundreds of land. Because in Donbass, they had to pay a lot of big salaries there to the coal miners and to the metallurgy sector employees. And they had no reason to have these 6 portions of land. The salary of a coal miner was same as a Ukrainian minister's salary at one time. I know this for a fact, because in Soviet rubles, a coal miner could have 450 rubles, and minister would also have 450, maybe 500 rubles. There you go. Now, in substance, to answer your question, yes, you had the right question. In my opinion, there are 3 scenarios of development in Ukraine, talking about the future. First scenario is the most likely one. Status quo will be preserved. The system of power, of authority, will remain as it is today. In my opinion, the light at the end of the tunnel in this case will be approximately in about 25 years. 25 years. Nord's theory, as you correctly pointed out, tens of countries went through this process to the system of normal management. It takes about 50 years. But I like to say Jews went through desert for 40 years. But we are not as genius people as Jews, so we're going to have to go a little bit longer. So this is the first scenario. Under this scenario, we will totally depend on the foreign factors for import-export, conditions of trade. And now we also have political system. There'll be 3-4%, maybe the tempo of growth will be 5-3%. It'll vary. But this is the most likely scenario. That is, one more generation has to spin through this cycle, and then we will arrive to the level of Western European nations. The second scenario, the one I consider to be still possible, but very, very little chance of this succeeding. When we give to outsource to our donors, foreign donors, key positions in the government, in courts, in commercial structures. That is, it's not enough for Americans to give us money or guarantees or advice. It doesn't work. It's been proven theoretically, not just an example of Ukraine, but theoretically globally. It doesn't work. Ukrainians are now mulling it over and rethinking their approach. In Iraq, they wanted to conduct elections and elect democratic government, Iraq. In other countries, same thing. It's impossible. If you have already won over the country militarily, then you have to organize power for a period of 5 to 10 years. So in order to break the umbilical cord which holds the country to its past. In our case, umbilical cord is corruption, bureaucracy, lack of education, simple just rudeness, and then they have different problems. And if we outsource, let's say, 5, 10 years, I think the system will work ideally. We'll have good roads, the cars will be able to drive on them, the courts are going to sue the right people and get the right verdicts. Maybe Americans, for instance, will delegate to European Union, and Ukraine, not being a member of EU, will conduct itself in accordance with the same rules, norms, and laws, and receive the same dotations, subsidies, as countries like Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic. It's an ideal alternative. It's not what was before, when corrupted authorities would itself elect and appoint foreigners to rule. The foreigners always would find these empty bubbles of people of foreigners who they would put in these positions, who couldn't do anything. But I'm talking about reverse situation, where the American and European elites will, from Ukrainians, appoint their people to the key positions. And then the system will begin to work. But the probability of this occurring is actually very little. And the third alternative is that is more and more increasingly possible, is not 1%, I would give this 5, maybe 10%. In Ukraine, to the power of authority usually comes reformer/dictator. That's the alternative. Pinochet, look at him. Kuan Yu. Saakashvili when he was in Georgia, who cuts the umbilical cord and who cuts off the umbilical cord and spits on the previous laws. It's possible for it to occur here. That's a third scenario. According to economic growth, the last scenario may bring to a huge development, 10 to 15% during next 10 to 15 years, the growth. Because we now reached the bottom of $2,000 for a person for the population, middle African levels of GDP. That's what it is. You cannot go any lower than where we are right now. There's just nowhere you can go lower. So that's why you can go very high. EU manages Ukraine. It gives 7-8%, which is good growth. That also is acceptable to us. But most likely, unfortunately, will be the status quo. And we will live like... That is my vision of the future. If 24 elites could not do anything, we changed government 24, 25 times, practically every year. And the system itself preserved itself. 2 Maidans didn't change anything. If you have any other questions, I have also a recipe of how to achieve this, if anybody has any questions. Yes. Yes. Renato Marquez was an ambassador here from Brazil 2 terms, and now he's back in town. Sir.
Okay. I'd like to thank your invitation to be here tonight. I was ambassador of Brazil here from 2003 to 2009, and I think I learned a lot from the interventions that I heard here tonight. I would like to raise 2 questions. The first one has to do with one aspect that existed already when I was here, which has to do with the relations with the European Union and the perspectives or prospects for Ukraine to become a member or have much closer relations with the European Union. In my view at the time, I was very skeptical that something real concrete might happen in that field for, let's say, 3 basic reasons. The first one, which might be the second or the third, never mind the order, is there is a foreign factor, which is Russia. Of course, Russia is a nuclear superpower, and the Europeans know that, even the Americans know that. So it's very difficult to challenge their obvious intention to keep Ukraine under their sphere of influence. The second question has to do directly with the European Union. Ukrainian has, when I was here, it was 48 million. Now I read 42 million. I don't know which one is true, but anyway, it's not easy to absorb a country of such weight, even from the political point of view. How would the decision-making process in the European Union be affected by the insertion of Ukraine inside that decision-making process? So it's something that would make, let's say, all the eastern part of Europe, taking into consideration even a traditional alliance between Ukraine and Poland, which a much bigger weight than they ever had before in comparison to traditional countries like Germany and France. So that would make a big difference in terms of political weight inside the European Union. And the third one has to do with the potential, which obviously is not exploited, from the agricultural potential of Ukraine, which would be a big and real challenge to the preservation or to the maintenance of the common agricultural policy in Europe. Even taking into consideration that those countries who were the founders of the European Union, they are the main interested in keeping the common agricultural policy. If not all of them, if not so much Germany, for sure France. Mercosur is now negotiating a commercial treaty with the European Union, and there are 11 countries in the European Union under the leadership of France which are against any kind of arrangement with Mercosur, because Brazil, not to mention Argentina, are very big agricultural producers. So I think that in a way the European Union has a lip service diplomacy towards Ukraine, but not a real program for Ukraine. And the second issue is something that you mentioned. It has to do about the quality of education and investment in education. We also have that speech now in Brazil. We all agree that a lot of things have to be done in terms of education, much more investment. But the way I see it in Brazil, and I believe that in a way would also happen here in Ukraine, is that I think all the people who are now in the university and in the school system in Brazil read Gramsci a long time ago. So they control the kind of education, the kind of values, the kind of information that they are providing to the new generations of Brazilians. I even read one day, out of curiosity, some school book of history, and it was like, I would say, a Soviet book of history, which means that more and more people in Brazil are graduating under that kind of influence. So the question is not only invest more, but also we have to redefine the kind of education we are providing to the new generations, so as we can achieve the goals that you mentioned and which we share also in Brazil. Thank you.
I don't think that inclusion of Ukraine into European Union is such a big priority for Ukraine. The most important thing for me is the mentality changes. I think that if mentality changes, then the problem of joining the EU will resolve itself by itself. And for us, the most important thing for us, more important, is to be included into NATO. NATO. To European Union, we resolve our issue with association, we're resolving our issues that way, but that's not our priority. When it comes to education, I completely agree with you, and unfortunately, this is not the determinative position of our government, that education, in what sense? The education oriented for new values in the future. There's main policy of Ukraine, which to us most important policy. But it's not just education, but education where new values are the rod for this education. I always spoke in different stages that when you say, when you study 2 times 2 is 4, then in this arithmetical, you should also somehow in that understand that there's some degree of freedom. Okay, I'd just like to add, I'm not so sure about, I don't agree with the European Union. For Ukraine, European Union, it's very important. Let's first imagine that European Union wasn't joined by Bulgaria or Romania, it didn't join. I think that the level of corruption and disruption and chaos would be quite large in those countries. Just as Russia's influence on Bulgaria, and that's why policy of European Union of easy, light influence on Ukraine is an absolute mistake. More importantly, moreover, now deep-thinking economists and sociologists have come to a realization, and myself also, I wrote in my book, elite local of the developing nations, intellectually, morally, they have different morals, different values. Material is much more powerful than that of donors, foreign donors, because they survived through difficult situations, circumstances. And that is why if you are helping with money, then you have to take power too. And you cannot just give money, credits, loans, technical assistance to corrupted system. It's incredibly harmful politics. It cements the status quo. It blocks reforms. And it makes the corrupted elite much wealthier, much richer, which are simply exploiting it. And this is in all countries of the world, not just Ukraine. Yes. And you have to understand that. And that is why the only thing that can save Ukraine, in my opinion, is the absolutely different relationship of European Union towards our country. Harsh laws, the way they did it in Poland, the way they did it in Bulgaria. Not Poles created those laws. It was European Union. It was forcing them all the procedures on the key parameters. And it monitored their implementation. That's exactly what we need to do in Ukraine. No steps to the left, steps to the right. Step to the left, you get shot. That's it. That policy you can conduct here. And then we can enter the European Union. And I agree about NATO. One word about NATO. Also, I mentioned in my book that conclusion that Ukraine's joining the NATO and deploying military bases or NATO on the territory of Ukraine would save not only Ukraine, but also Russia. More than that, Russia will be the main beneficiary of this. Why? Because I cannot imagine a situation where where Russians would move in towards American soldier. The only thing that they're afraid of Americans. Now, at first, before they were afraid of Germans. Now they're afraid of Americans. And I think that will save Russia from silly, unreasoned moves. Putin will give up and take a step back. And then they may even lift the sanctions that he wants. And then Russia can continue to survive. I think that harsh sanctions and the falling prices on oil and any step of crisis in Russia can bring to social cataclysms. And one of the triggers could be deficit of vodka in St. Petersburg or in Moscow. That's going to be a crisis for 1 month. And that's enough to cause a trigger. And food, you need 2 years. If they run out of food, you got 2 years. Russia can survive without food for 2 years. Vodka, 1 month. Okay, we have time for, like, I think, what, 2 more questions? And then that's it. So we're going to have this, and then we're going to Martin, yeah?
Okay. I think what is the biggest problem that we should be aware is the conflict of interest. It is something that also in Italy people do not speak so much, but is at the base of the problem of this kind of capitalistic economy. I mean, if you have the control of the economy, if you have a huge economic power, and you have as well the control of the television and the control of some politics, it is very easy for you to make business. You don't want to change this kind of system. So it's, for this kind of people, for this kind of oligarchs, elites, until they are not disconnected from television system and from the political system, nothing will change, in my opinion. The most important thing is to have a political class completely disconnected and completely clean from conflict of interest, from connection with the economic and financial world, and also with the television. In Italy, we have the biggest broadcast industrial man, that is Silvio Berlusconi, that is in the politics, and it is a huge problem because he can promote whatever he wants, and they enter into the parliament and they can make the law just for his business and not for the good of the Italian people. So this is the first issues. Yeah. The second issues that I would like to say is about university, about the idea of privatization of university. That actually I don't agree so much in this. I mean, if we compare with the countries with the highest level of quality of life, such as, for example, the Nordic countries like Germany, for example, or Denmark or Sweden, that have a very, very high quality of life. The government invests huge amount of money in public utilities, such as hospitals, such as universities, and in this you can create these dirigent class, these leaders that can drive reforms and can drive the country in a growth, sustainable growth. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just say one phrase to each of your questions. I don't disbelieve you when you say that we are like Italy. I just want to remind you the difference in GDP per person in Italy and in Ukraine. It's a huge difference, which was produced by something. There's something behind this. So which means we're not exactly alike. That's first of all. Second of all, when we're talking about what education is necessary for each country, what type of education, I would not borrow educational system from different countries. Each country has, because of its own mentality, different types of education that are optimal for it. So let's in our own country, experiment, and we will receive the optimal result, the best result for us, instead of borrowing it from other nations. I would add about oligarchs on television that you mentioned. I don't imagine how it can be done to tear them away from their channels. In Ukraine, I think that 15 years, everybody's screaming, you have to separate the power from money, from television, from and so on. So far, I haven't seen one recipe how it can be accomplished practically, other than just wishes for it to occur. Besides simple wishes, I haven't seen anything that would give us a recipe. Maybe when television will become a business, profitable business, then we can return to this question. I mean, I understand in Italy it's a business, television, and it's a good business if you judge by how Mr. Berlusconi has been doing for himself. And then he has influence. I don't know how he continues to exercise that while he was doing politician. I don't know how he did it there, but here it's impossible. And just in a substance of how to separate power from business, authorities from business. I thought about this for a long time, and in this very last moment, in my book, I found the answer. Practical answer. Based on the fact that in Ukraine, power authority means equal to money. Investment into authority, into the government, investment gives the highest returns. Much more than into innovations and research and development, and much more than even corruption itself. Then the recipe is as follows. In Ukraine, for 10 years, you have to do the following standards of the income of the people in authority, in power, with positions of power. Substance, essence is the following. The person who goes into any government position, whatever that would be, from president to deputy, minister, mayor, signs a consensual agreement, basically, which says all income except his salary that he gets go towards the budget of whatever level. If it's a mayor, he has a factory, he has a trademark, he has deposits in the bank, real property, buildings he rents. Everything goes into the income of the city. President's income to the country. Local deputy of the rayon into the budget of the rayon, city council. And then the pool that business has towards government positions will be much less. It won't be as attractive. You don't make anything. That's a recipe how to separate power from money. Only then this can occur. And then I completely agree with you. Okay, last question for the evening will belong to Mr. Martin Nunn from White's Communication. Sir.
Mr. Paschava, I have to agree with everything you said. And over the years, and I've been here 25 years now, as your hair has got grayer, what I notice is you never lose that spark of youthful enthusiasm. And I have to say that that is the only spark of youthful enthusiasm that I've actually seen here this evening. I'm an optimist. That's why I've lived here for such a long time. Now, you've been saying to the audience that everything is bad and it's going to take time and everything is going to be slow moving. So I have a question for you. In the last 5 years, the Ukrainian IT industry has grown from a postage stamp to the third largest export. How come the IT industry can become probably the most powerful IT industry in Europe today in 5 years, but everybody's saying everything is going to take decades? It isn't. It's going to take people, young people, to get off their backsides and start changing things. Unfortunately, our political elite is still locked in a time warp of the Soviet era. And until we change that, nothing else in this country is going to change. So please explain to me why you think that Ukraine cannot change if our IT industry can. Thank you.
I say the opposite of what you're saying. I say the opposite. No, you misunderstood me. What I'm saying is Ukraine is definitely going to change. More than that. Yes. More than that. No, he's the pessimist. You confused. He's the optimist. Oh, then he'll let you have it. So if you consider the bottom of the well from which we are now going up, I was saying that we have incredible results, including the changes of our values. Millions of people participated in more than 40 Maidans, which took place all around the country. But changes are always slow. The values do not change overnight. There are simple research studies that will show you this, that reality and values changes over generations. Second generation is at least you can expect. And institutions, they don't work if they don't correspond to the values of the population. And that is why it'll be a process like you say. But it'll be slow from the point of view of any average person's life. From the viewpoint of a country's life, it's very fast. You're saying that IT and its relations to the economy and growth. I can tell you that agriculture is developing right now, not as an aim, as a goal, but as an industrial branch. We have not only IT that is developing rapidly. We have a sea of positivity, but when it comes to a person's human being life, people come to me. I don't know, you're not the one who came to me to say this. 3 years already, and nothing changed. What is 3 years? 3 years is nothing. It's nothing in the country's history. A small comment. Unfortunately, IT is not number 3 in export. If you look at statistics, in statistics, you don't see export in IT in our statistics. We have one outsourcing. Maybe somebody declared that to be so. Blessed are the ones who believe. The explanation actually is very simple. It does. The IT doesn't depend on the government. You cannot regulate it, and that is why it's exploding. And that is the future of Ukraine. That's it. I got nothing to say. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming here. We're going to have a... Sam?
It was promised that we would have a lottery draw. As I said, this evening's event was supported by a number of our partners. We're incredibly grateful for their support. So we're going to give away just a couple of prizes. And I would like to, first of all, welcome to the stage... Where should we start? We're going to start with you. Because for the last 2 days, I've been feeling awesome. Because I had an appointment with my chiropractor. And this guy's he's awesome. Let me introduce Sean from Dr. Sam. He's just going to say a couple of words very quickly about Dr. Sam. And we're going to give away a certificate.
Yes. Hi, my name is Sean. I'm a chiropractor, a doctor that works with the neck pains, headaches, low back pains. And I work for Dr. Sam. Dr. Sam, I would say, is pretty much a very... modern medical network. So if you're expat and you're working here, they do all their lab tests inside. They have OBGYNs all the way to pediatrician, medical doctors, and we have pharmacies at every location. And today, the winner will win 3 sessions for a beautiful massage. So 3 sessions of a massage.
And it's awesome, I'll tell you, right? Yeah. Okay. And the winner is this your name? No. Okay. Tatiana Babko. Do we have still Alha?
Congratulations, Tatiana. This is your certificate for 3 free massages.
I see. Thank you very much.
Enjoy. Okay. I would now just like to welcome to the stage Joris. Where are you, Joris? We have tonight to be grateful to Mr. Jesper Henriksen, the GM of the Radisson Blue, our hosts, and the Radisson is part of the Carlson Residor Group, who have just opened a brand new hotel here in Kiev.
Thank you, Sam. My name is Yuri Zurov. I'm general manager of recently opened Park Inn by Radisson Kiev Troitska. So we are relatively younger brand compared to Radisson Blue, but at the same time we are fast growing, dynamic, colorful, mid-market brand. Like I said, just opened a couple of weeks ago, and we have 196 rooms, restaurant, lobby bar, 6 boardrooms. Next year adding another 3 meeting rooms on the 18th floor, and 1 more restaurant on a terrace on the 1st floor. And we are located right next to the Olympijski Stadium, so that makes us the best place to go before the football game for a drink or for the snack. And I would like to invite you all to come and visit us, not just the lucky winner of this lottery draw, to experience yourself our friendly and uncomplicated service. And the winner tonight gets a complimentary stay with us for 2 people.
Bring that in a hotel, it's always good. Would you be kind enough for me to select the winner? Thank you very much. And the winner is Mauricio, my man from Italy.
Thank you very much for coming.